member for Thornhill.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I'm pleased to continue on behalf of the Progressive Conservative Party. And I've got to say right off the top that in beginning to prepare for this debate, thinking about the budget motion, an expression came into my mind that has been there for many, many, many years, and I can't think of one that applies more directly to this situation. And I say it to all of my Liberal friends sitting on the other side. You cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And you can't. It was Thursday. It was the day that opposition and media go early in the morning into the lockup. For those watching us at home, the lockup is where we get a preview of the budget before the finance minister actually delivers his speech here in the House. And I took a look at this document. In fact, I have it here with me. It's not a prop. That's what the budget looks like. And I thought to myself, is my watch wrong? Because it seems to me like it must be April Fool's Day. But it was no joke. It was not a joke. And here's what isn't the joke. The Liberals didn't even write their own budget, Speaker. The budget is essentially a prenuptial agreement between the NDP and the Liberals to serve their own political gain.
You hit the nail on the head, Peter.
Both of those parties, political gain, but at least in the case of the NDP actually believes that it's helping Ontarians. I'll give them that. It's not about you out there. It's about the Liberals saving their own backsides. The NDP has a laundry list of demands that has basically been accepted in total by the Liberal government. And it costs an additional $1 billion annually, and as amply illustrated by my leader moments ago, that's another $1 billion we just don't have. And it's not about whether we have it or not. It's about keeping people in power who have no business and no legitimate claim to power in the province of Ontario today. Springtime is supposed to be, Speaker, a time of growth and renewal. With this budget, the only thing that this government has renewed and the only thing that it's grown is its commitment to the old Dalton McGuinty playbook of taxing you more, then spending all of that and then some. The Wynne-Horvath alliance will increase the financial burden on our province, and it will exacerbate our jobs crisis, further endangering our province's vital signs, and more importantly, endangering your personal financial viability sitting at that kitchen table or that home office desk every night and trying to figure out, A, whether you can pay the bills, and B, whether you're going to have a job to be able to pay them. These people have failed to produce a realistic and a credible debt reduction plan to restore confidence in our economy and to create jobs. Two things that have been continuously missing from budgets presented by that party over a period of years. This budget is brought to you by people who are long on rhetoric and low on math skills. We need to balance the budget, but the Liberals cannot fathom what the word balance even means. How do you control spending without so much as a single piece of legislation aimed at doing that? You know, there's a favorite page that I have in this book, and this is a book that we'll hear over the course of the coming weeks. Liberals standing up during question period or in debate, and they'll say that we didn't read it, but my favorite page is page 109. There's a chart on page 109. Now, I have to tell a story. A couple of weeks ago, our party went to the public, went through the media to the public, and people will recall this, and we said, you know, they talk about balancing the budget, bringing the deficit to a zero by 2017-18. That's what they say they're going to do, but the problem is they don't provide any detail. There's nothing in there on costs. They just have little hash marks across the cost line, and they have a zero at the bottom line in 2017-18. How are they going to do it? And we challenged them. So I have to say, they gave us an answer. They put real numbers in there. So what they say is the interim figures as to the way we finished the year that ended March 31st, they spent about $114 billion. And according to plan, in the budget just presented, that'll rise to $117 billion in the year that we've already started. So in terms of controlling anything, they're already $3.6 billion ahead. And then Oh, by next year, it'll only reduce by about $1 billion to $118 billion. And look at that. In the year after that, they'll hold it at $118 billion. And then we take the extend look to 2016-17, where guess what? The expenditures will again be $118 billion. And we go to the final year, the year in which they are going to bring to a balance the bottom line, and the expenditures that year, surprisingly, will be again $118 billion. This is a government that's been around through 10 budgets, that has managed to double spending in the province of Ontario over that period of time, that has doubled the debt to something pushing close to $300 billion, and these are the people that we're going to trust to hold the line for 4 years? Who are you kidding?
Good point.
Ontarians already pay more and work longer for this McGuinty-Wynne government. And you Liberal MPPs over there, you'll stand in your places and you'll debate. And you'll say we were voting against it before we read it. Well, now we've read it. So I ask a question. Have you? Because I doubt it. Those folks were ready to vote for this budget no matter what it said when it came out, because that's what they were told to do. If you had read it, how could you even begin to believe that your party has Ontario's back? Because it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Here's some interesting factoid material. From January 1st to June 10th, every single dollar that you make goes to the government. Tax Freedom Day for Ontarians is now 7 days later than it was in 2009. I mean, we've gained a week in about 3.5 years. You now work 7 days more for this government than you did in 2009. That's remarkable. Anyway, you're still working for them right now. As you can tell, it's another 4 weeks before we achieve that point and have tax freedom. So through the McGuinty-Wynne government's unbridled spending, Ontario has the highest debt in our history. 146 years of history for Ontario, staring down the barrel of a financial gun right now as we are at $273 billion and looking within the next couple of years at $300 billion in accumulated debt. How do you ever pay that back? You don't. Your kids do. And your grandkids do. If they can. If we can bail this province out in the intervening time. That's why we need a change. This is a pivotal moment for Ontario, Speaker. Our province's finances are in shambles. We have been called to question by Moody's and by S&P, lost 300,000 well-paid manufacturing jobs, and have seen many companies pack up and just leave, 2 more just recently. And we don't see a lot of new ones arriving to replace those. Our province has, at any given moment, right now, between 500 and 600,000 people looking for work. Yes, Premier Wynne, it's 7.7% unemployment. Thought you might want to know that because you didn't last week. This is not the prosperous Ontario where I raised my kids. We are overachieving in debt. Equalization payments are tilting inwards as other provinces take care of Ontario. If debt interest were a ministry, it would be the 3rd highest spending government department. Number 1, health, as arguably it should be. Number 2, education. And number 3, the Ministry of Interest, just to service our debt. With continued spending in this budget without any cutbacks, the Liberals are trying to fight fire with wind. And what do then? You spread the flames. The McGuinty-Wynne government celebrates our debt and our deficit. They celebrate it. And the fact that we are not $15 billion in the hole for last year, but I'm using quotes around this, only $9.8 billion. They applauded that when Finance Minister Sousa read his budget speech last week. They applauded it. Who knew that sheep could clap? Only the Ontario Liberals would celebrate a $9.8 billion deficit. And not only that, Speaker, it was a fudged number. By way of proof, the deficit in the new budget actually increases next year to $11.7 billion. These are the people who say they're going to arrive at balance in 2017-18. They must be born with silver spoons in their mouths to think that these numbers that I'm quoting, are small amounts of money. What a sense of entitlement. It is imperative to get our province's fiscal house in order, and this government doesn't even begin to be remorseful. The first step towards recovery is admitting that you have a problem. The McGuinty-Wynne Liberals are unable to admit that they have gravely failed this province. They have been negligent caregivers to the province of Ontario. Based on facts and figures, we know that they cannot balance this budget. There are some good ideas thrown in, there always are, but they are so drowned out by the fact that the Liberals cannot manage the books, never have, and as far as I can see, never will. But they do know how to tax, and they do know how to spend your money. Premier Wynne's first move was to instantly increase public sector spending through the growth in the size of the Liberal government's cabinet. And I might say, to the point of ministries, 2 out of 3 of those ministries are sustaining increasing expenditures in the year that we're in now, this budget year. Premier Wynne gave her friends job title bumps and pay raises. There are no Liberal MPPs, and I think this is really worth noting for our friends watching at home, there are no Liberal MPPs who do not have some kind of a pay bump up through an appointed designation. Not one. Pay freeze for MPPs? Well, not Liberal MPPs. During the McGuinty-Wynne tenure, the Premier, and I'm quoting here, increased program spending by an average of 6.1% annually, nearly twice the combined rate of inflation and population growth, which was at 3.1%. Those figures courtesy of the Fraser Institute. The Liberal government's deficit is your money. It's your money. They owe you money. But guess what? You get to pay it. Even with our current record low interest rates, interest payments on Ontario's debt will reach just about $11 billion this year. They will consume 9.2% of government revenues. Again, citing statistics that come from the Fraser Institute. And again, quoting from, or at least paraphrasing, my leader. When you take 9.2% of the revenue away just to service debt, what kinds of services are you giving up? What kinds of needs that need to be fulfilled are you missing out on? That's money that is not going to expand health care. It's not going towards infrastructure. It's not going towards any kind of investment. It's not creating jobs. You want that transit? They'll use revenue tools. I love that phrase, revenue tools. Shall I translate? Taxes. That's what it is. It's taxes. This government does not have the skill or the backbone to fix our serious problems. The Minister of Finance himself is one of the most expensive guys around. He costs $275 million. He's the $275 million man. How do I draw that conclusion? His seat was one of the ones saved when they paid for the non-existent Mississauga power plant. He was the recipient of that saved seat. You had to pay even to get a date from him. No, not that kind of a date. The late budget date, which was announced where? At the Economic Club. The business elite, they knew when your late budget date was coming. The rest of the hardworking people of Ontario, you had to wait to hear. By the way, poor Minister Sousa, I was there. He didn't get any applause over there when he announced his deficit figure. He only got them here, from all of you Liberals over there. Budgets are typically tabled in March. We are now debating this budget in May. Ontarians have been left waiting. Now they will be left holding the bag. The Liberals hired renowned economist Don Drummond to take a fine-tooth comb to each and every ministry and expense in this province. His ultimate conclusion was the same as ours: cut spending and adhere to a strict debt reduction plan. His instruction, however, Speaker, and this is important, was clarion clear. Do this fast and do it all. Instead, they are going to, quote, try, unquote, and implement 60% of his recommendations. At least, Speaker, we're supposed to believe that. This is a failing grade for a government that prides itself on education. They don't grasp the material. They don't understand our province's current financial state. That's also ignoring expert advice from their own man. Like your doctor telling you you should lose weight, you should eat better, you should quit smoking, you should start exercising, you should swear off Twinkies, keep doing everything else and claim success. You just stop the Twinkies and you're successful. I don't think so. No restraint or self-control for this government. None. Ontario's economy needs to immediately be jolted back to life. It needs a defibrillator. It needs resuscitation. Somebody's out there ready to do it. We're out here ready to do it. This government needs to get back to the drawing board, or it needs to just get out of the way.
Hear, hear.
The Minister of Finance and I both have past careers in the private sector. Some people know that. Prior to our public life here at Queen's Park, we share that. We both know that when you don't produce the best possible results, what happens? You're fired, or you're just plain out of business. That is the ultimate in accountability. It is the price for failure. We have a government that has kicked Ontarians in the teeth. It has left them feeling winded, and now it's coming back to take another blow. Ontarians must demand action from this government to control costs, and Ontarians need proof that it's being done. This budget fails to live up to any of the expectations. Tim Hudak and the Ontario PCs have been the only party willing to consider views and take direct input from Ontarians. The only party that has shown strong, stable, and principled leadership. Our Paths to Prosperity white papers have been released on issues that matter to people, like creating jobs and fixing our economy, health care, home care, education, and reducing red tape for business and cutting government bureaucracy. We have a comprehensive and a concrete plan to create jobs, to control spending, and to get our economy back on track. We have it. As a matter of fact, I might point out, Speaker, that all of the conclusions of all of those white papers are contained in a minority section of the report that was given not only to this House, but to the Finance Minister, done by the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, so that he could see what our plan is. It's public, it's there, but most importantly, we have it. Ontario has lived 9.5 years with this same McGuinty-Wynne tax and spend agenda, the latest, greatest example of how they use your money. Imagine how far that $1 billion+ burned by the McGuinty-Wynne election team would have gone right now, or the $300 million and counting that they handed teachers to cover their missteps of last fall. For the media, I have your headline for tomorrow: Ontario Liberals more for themselves than for you. It's all at your expense. Your expense, people of Ontario. You know, Einstein's definition of insanity pops into my mind. And I think most people know it, but it bears repeating. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But that's what they're doing. The McGuinty-Wynne legacy is debt, lost jobs, and excessive spending, and bloating the public sector, all at the expense of the people of Ontario. Now, thanks to this government, the public sector is now the new elite, funded by Ontarians, protected by union bosses, and all brought to you by the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals. You pay, they retire with a big pension. Are you okay with that? Because I'm not. Public sector compensation now exceeds that of the private sector by 14%. Fraser Institute figures, also figures done by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And if you add in pensions and health benefits that they get that you don't, about 27% differentiation. Don't believe me? Take a look at the article 2 weeks ago in Maclean's magazine that talks about the new elite, which is people who work in the broader public sector, who are the beneficiaries of this kind of perk that nobody else can get. You know, it sounds like I'm very anti-union. I want to point out that it's not unions that I'm against. I myself was a member of a union for about 40 years, so it's not as if I'm against unions. But unions have to understand, in the broader public sector, in the public service, that their members are no different than any other Ontarians, and that in the parlance of the day, we all have to take one for the team. And you know what? The rest of us have. It's almost as if the government, and I'm quoting from the former finance minister, went after the low-hanging fruit. That's what he said about the budget last year. Well, now we're down to the pits. So what are we going to do? The pendulum has now swung in a complete opposite direction. Only the Ontario PCs are willing to stand up for taxpayers and not allow this bad behavior to continue. We will stand up to schoolyard bullies. That's what we're going to do. over half of all Ontario government program spending goes to public sector labour costs. Tim Hudak and the PC caucus have called for a 2-year across-the-board broader public sector legislated wage freeze to save $2 billion each year and begin the process of controlling government spending. And it's fair. I might point out that that was a bill that I tabled in this House myself about 2 months ago, and it actually passed second reading. And it passed second reading because they couldn't whip enough of their members in here to vote against it. Ontarians have been paying for raises for unionized government workers while they themselves are struggling to make ends meet. How fair is that? We cannot cut the deficit without putting a temporary brake on excessive costs. Premier Wynne doesn't realize the financial burden that the Liberal government's political pandering to union bosses has placed on our pocketbooks. It has been 9.5 years of driving up public sector spending and putting the demands of union bosses first. 9.5 years of taxpayers footing the bill for the Liberals' political game. They claim that it's all under control. It's not. Want an example? The Sunshine List came out a couple of months ago. Sunshine List, for those who don't know, is a list of all people employed in one way or another by the government who earn in excess of $100,000. It increased by 8,823 people, almost 9,000 more people making $100,000 plus this year than last year. How is it possible for that government to tell us that there's no increase for anybody, that they've maintained a zero across the board if you add 9,000 people to a list of folks who earn six figures? I don't begin to understand it. Does it sound like control to you? I don't think so, Speaker. There is no question either that auto insurance rates need addressing. They're high in the province of Ontario. We agree. In fact, premiums have increased by 65% in the last 10 years. 65% in the last 10 years. What strikes you as coincidental about 10 years? Oh, yes, that's the period of time they've been in power, 65%. The Insurance Bureau of Canada called this 15% NDP idea in the budget, reducing auto insurance by 15%, and I'm quoting, a band-aid solution that may score political points, but for the long term, all stakeholders need to continue to push for needed reforms and fight fraud, unquote. That's what the Finance Committee looked at last summer. That's what they confirmed was the problem. That's what we have to be addressing. But no, we'll just lop 15% off the top because that's what the third party wants. You know the NDP doesn't have much of a track record when it comes to arithmetic. And they're the ones who are driving the process. This proposal is coming from the same party that put forward a private member's bill last spring that would have seen convicted drunk drivers paying less for auto insurance. 15% across the board also means that bad drivers get to pay less too. So is that what they really want? Is that what you really want? Is that what all of you out there really want? And who do you really want dictating how your tax dollars are going to be spent? This is an NDP Liberal coalition in the bud, maybe not so much in the bud. It is a race to drive Ontario into the ground. Liberal-NDP coalition. What a joke. It's a volatile comedy of errors, but it is not a laughing matter, Speaker. This is an epic tragedy for Ontario. This is a prime example of failing to address the root cause of an issue. Auto insurance fraud, $1.6 billion a year. Auto insurance fraud, $1.6 billion. What could that buy? The Anti-Fraud Task Force was created in 2011 to produce regulatory changes. Have you seen any regulatory changes? I don't think so. What's the first change? Third party says we won't vote for your budget unless you put in a 15% drop, so they do it. That's regulatory change. What nonsense. There's been a lot of talk about the good work that it did. We saw no action. We need our economy to fire on all cylinders, with all of the guessing on the cost of moving the power plants. It's kind of like Drew Carey from The Price is Right is in the Premier's office, and he's yelling, "Come on down, let's spin the wheel. Actual retail price? Well, we'll subpoena you to find out."
It's your turn, Andrea.
With your ill-fated and convoluted attempts to cover up the cost to taxpayers, there is no doubt that Liberal Xerox machines and black markers and whiteout all work. Well, I want to conclude this, Speaker, by saying a couple of things. We will hold your feet to the fire. We will get to the bottom of that scandal. The need for this negligent government to cut spending has never been more urgent. As a matter of fact, the need for this negligent government to go has never been more urgent. Ontarians, top-tier credit rating agencies, renowned economists like Don Drummond agree that we must get our spending under control. Because of our increasing debt and the lack of a credible plan to eliminate it, both Moody's and Standard & Poor's questioned or downgraded Ontario's credit ratings last year. That was the warning, the alert. Even the most eternal optimists know that we are in dire straits and that there will be no light at the end of the tunnel without immediate action. We need to send a serious signal to investors that Ontario is ready to tackle its economic challenges and get our financial house in order. The Ontario PC Party believes that the government should assist Ontario families, not cause a further strain on household finances. The same players and the same story for the past 9.5 years. Speaker, it has to stop. We need a government that delivers on its promises. Balancing the books by 2017-18 will be mathematically impossible. There is no plan to get our economy back on solid ground. No new jobs, no leadership, no backbone. The only alternative is clear. The Ontario PCs have a plan to get Ontario moving again and get our fiscal house in order to regain lost jobs in this province. And that, Speaker, is precisely what we intend to do. Thank you.